Finally, after 2 years with no real content, Overwatch 2 is finally here. Well, sort of. Okay, so technically it's not out yet, but we did get a multiplayer update. Like most gamers who were alive in 2016, I hopped on the Overwatch bandwagon, but I didn't just play it, I was hooked. I was online every day. I built a squad for ranked, followed a bunch of news channels, watched gameplay videos. Over time though, the meta got kinda stale, the content dried up, and my Overwatch buddies stopped playing the game. So aside from the occasional game of free-for-all, I had basically moved on. But I always loved the core concept of Overwatch. It was a solid game that only fizzled out because the devs allowed it to. So when they announced Overwatch 2, I was excited. But then I saw the beta gameplay and excitement turned to disappointment. How dare they re-release the same game and call it a sequel? All they did is make it one less player, add a couple of new heroes, and put a number 2 in the logo. That was my first thought at least. But now that I've got the game in my hands with some solid playtime, I can honestly say that I was wrong. Kind of. So let's talk about it. What's up with Overwatch 2? Let me just start by saying, if you hated the original Overwatch, this isn't going to change your mind. Overwatch 2 is effectively just an update to the first game. The multiplayer has been revamped and we'll get a co-op mode eventually. But for all intents and purposes, this is still Overwatch. With this update though, the original game is now completely gone. Most of your progress and cosmetics should carry over when you merge your account. However, I can see how some people would have an issue with losing Overwatch 1. If you were still running a full team in the first game, now one of your friends just can't play with you anymore, and that's kind of a bummer. But for everyone else, the update is mostly good, and here's why. As part of the transition to Overwatch 2, the multiplayer is now free to play. That means now you have more leverage when asking your friends to play Overwatch. You PC players may not know this, but up until the Overwatch 2 beta release, most of us on consoles still had to pay $60 just to access Overwatch. I'll save my complaints about how Blizzard treats console players for another time, but making this game free to play was a great idea. It makes the game available to almost everybody. Plus, it always felt weird to me that a $60 game had loot boxes. Now, not only is the game free, but it also moved away from a loot box system. Every cosmetic in the game is now accessible either through the Battle Pass or by direct purchase. I'm honestly surprised by how Activision Blizzard have transformed their monetization structure here, but I'm glad to see it. With that said, I do have one issue with how the game handles content. When it comes to the heroes, they chose a system that blocks most of the characters until you've made enough progress to unlock them. In many hero shooters like Rainbow Six Siege or Apex Legends, locking characters can be a good way to encourage players to grind the game or maybe even to spend money. But I'm not sure doing that here was a good idea. Unlike those other games, Overwatch allows you to constantly change characters mid-match. As a result, the characters are designed and balanced with a sort of rock, paper, scissors relationship. For example, hit-scan heroes like Soldier and Cassidy counter Pharah, so a Pharah player going up against them might switch to someone like Genji. And since Genji's kit relies on reflecting bullets, against a team with no hit-scan heroes, a Genji player might switch to another flanker like Tracer or Sombra. It feels a bit wrong to have heroes locked for new players when character switching is such a game-defining feature. Of course, most of the heroes that matter can be unlocked pretty quickly, but others seem to have unreasonably high requirements. Hamtaro is not worth 150 games. This isn't a game-breaking issue, but I can definitely see it facing criticism and possibly even changing later on. I've already mentioned one of the changes, which is that the team size went from 6 to 5. This means that instead of there being 2 tanks, 2 DPS, and 2 support, now there's 2 DPS and 2 support, but only 1 tank. Before I got to play with it, this sounded like a small change, but after playing, I can say without a doubt, this is probably the biggest change of the update. 5-player teams make the game feel much faster. When there's only 1 tank, the damage needed to kill a team drops dramatically, so there are less stalemates and team fights seem to flow much smoother. There is a downside to this though. To compensate for the lost tank, each tank was buffed to make them better able to defend the team. This includes adding new abilities for previously bland characters like Orisa, and health buffs for tanks across the board. These are good, solid changes, but the problem is, tanks still have their high damage output. For instance, Roadhog can still do the hook melee shoot combo to insta-kill characters with 200 HP. Meanwhile, between his high health pool and self-healing, a good Roadhog basically never dies, and the other tanks have similar abilities that make them unkillable damage farmers. Now, I have no problem with tanks being hard to kill. That's their job, but they shouldn't also have high damage. Tanks are currently some of the best DPS characters, and that's probably not a good thing. On a more positive note, Overwatch 2 at launch has tripled the previous hero release rate of 1 per year. They've released 3 brand new characters and they're all pretty good. You've got the new tank, Junker Queen, who's basically just Mad Maggie, but in Overwatch. She gets up close and personal with her shotgun and she's not afraid to throw hands with the enemy. There's the new DPS hero, Sojourn. She's a more fun version of Soldier 76. She's got a slide jump that'll send you flying and a rifle that becomes a railgun when charged. Definitely worth trying out. And finally, there's Kiriko, the new support hero. She's very fun and very satisfying, but she's also pretty challenging to play. Her weapons are these kunai knives that deal massive headshot damage, but the timing between them is pretty slow, so you really don't want to miss. She can wall climb, she has an escape teleport that sends you to a nearby teammate, and she heals with these paper tags that are really effective if used correctly. Definitely a tougher character to pick up, but she seems worth the effort. It's really cool to see a new character for each role, and I hope this is a sign of a quicker development cycle for Overwatch 2. I also just want to touch really quickly on the passive heal for the support class. Whoever thought to add this was a genius. Now as a solo healer, you can keep yourself alive without wasting resources that should be used for your team. As a person who mains healers, I fully support this change. Get it? Because the role is called support. Okay, so I know the title card said new maps, but I'm gonna be honest, some of the control maps were probably already in the first game and I just don't remember. So instead of embarrassing myself, I'm just gonna talk about the new push game mode. Cool? It's basically a game of tug of war where you compete to gain control of a robot that pushes a wall towards the goal. Whichever team reaches the goal first, or whoever pushes their wall furthest during the time limit, wins the game. I really like this mode. It's basically payload with a faster moving objective, and the enemy can also push it back. The interesting part to me is that at any point you can go from attacking to defending, so there's never a dull moment. It also seems like more of the map gets used in this mode since fights can break out wherever the robot happens to be. It might just be my favorite mode overall. Also, just as a side note, they removed the 2 capture point game mode, and I think we can all agree that this is a welcome change. 2 cap games were always a slog, just a stalemate waiting to see which team could get their ults first. Goodbye and good riddance. Hopefully, over time, Blizzard will continue to innovate and give us new ways to play so the modes don't become stale. With any new release, there will always be bumps and stumbles as the devs and the player base get settled in. If you've been keeping up with Overwatch 2, you'll know that the first week or so, it was basically impossible to get in. Between DDoS attacks, long queues, and server overload, the game was basically unplayable. It was clearly not ready for release. The game is mostly up and running now, but there are still some issues. At the time of writing this, Bastion is still not in the game because of a glitch, and the map Junkertown has also been removed from play. Additionally, there are some balancing issues that need to be ironed out. How Moira made it into a new game with 0 meaningful changes is beyond me. But there are also just slightly overtuned things, like Sombra's debuff or Zarya's always active bubbles. But as far as I know, the devs have already addressed these in a patch that's on the way. And it seems like the devs are listening and responding to feedback quicker than they were ever able to with Overwatch 1, so I expect good things moving forward. So, is Overwatch 2 worthy of the sequel title? In my honest opinion, no. Calling this Overwatch 2 is extremely generous when you look at what we've actually gotten so far. It's literally just an update to the game that we've had for the past 6 years. But that update does make the game feel fresh. The change to 5v5 gives the game a better pace, adding more value to each kill and putting more weight on individual performance. You still can't exactly carry if your team is bad, but there are far more opportunities for pivotal plays, at least now while we're still figuring things out. And while I don't personally agree with calling this Overwatch 2, I can acknowledge that using that name garnered more attention that brought old players back and convinced new players to try the game out. Some of my friends who had never played Overwatch before are now playing on a regular basis. So while the game is by no means revolutionary, it does have its merit, and I think it will successfully make Overwatch relevant again, as long as Blizzard keeps it updated. If you haven't already, you should definitely check it out. The game is free and there are a lot of new players, so now is the best time to jump in. And if you have played the game, I want to hear what you think. Are you enjoying Overwatch 2? What do you think would make the game better? Let me know in the comments below. Also, remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.